Imagine sitting at the same dining table where you and your brothers once planned family barbecues, only now the conversation is about invoices, debts, and who dropped the ball last quarter. You wonder, if this business falls apart, do we fall apart too? This is the hidden question many families face when money, legacy, and sibling bonds are tied together. So where do we even begin? When a family business begins to show cracks, emotions can rise quickly. A late payment feels like broken trust, a missed deadline feels like disrespect, and before long, siblings stop hearing each other as partners and start seeing enemies. That's why separating the people from the problem is so important. The problem may be declining sales, poor cash flow, or a disagreement on direction, but your brother or sister is not the problem. It sounds simple, yet in practice it's often the hardest thing to do. Families carry history, childhood rivalries, unspoken resentments, even the old, "Mom always liked you better" feeling that can slip into business conversations without warning. Suddenly, a budget meeting is no longer about numbers, it's about decades of emotional baggage. One way to approach this separation is by imagining the business as a shared project sitting in the middle of the table, not on anyone's shoulders. Instead of pointing fingers, "You're careless with money," try shifting the language to, "This part of the business is draining resources, how can we fix it together?" The change in wording might feel small, but it repositions the tension. The challenge is outside of you both, not inside the relationship. This is the same principle coaches use when a team is struggling. Focus on the play, not the player. Families who can train themselves to see the difference begin to argue less personally and solve more constructively. Think of it like home repair. If a window starts leaking, you don't accuse your spouse or sibling of being the leak. You both point at the window and figure out whether to seal it, replace it, or call in a professional. Business conflicts can be handled in the same way. By naming the problem clearly and separating it from identity, you make space for creative solutions instead of personal attacks. Another helpful practice is pausing before responding. When your sibling says something that stings, take a breath and ask yourself, "Is this about me or about the stress of the situation?" Often, it's the latter. Stress makes people speak sharply, and if you assume it's an attack, you deepen the wound. But if you assume it's the problem talking, not your brother, you protect the relationship. Over time, this mindset can preserve love even when the business is struggling. Because in the end, numbers can be rebuilt, debts can be paid, and businesses can even be reborn. But once trust between siblings is destroyed, rebuilding that can take a lifetime. That's why separating the people from the problem isn't just a business skill. It's a family survival skill. When tension grows inside a family business, it's easy to forget the story that brought everyone together in the first place. Most family businesses don't start with spreadsheets and contracts. They start with a dream, a kitchen table conversation, or a father who wanted to leave something behind for his children. Maybe it was about staying close as siblings. Maybe it was about carrying forward a tradition. Or maybe it was simply about survival, turning a skill into a livelihood. That origin story carries a kind of emotional currency, and when times get hard, revisiting it can remind everyone of the deeper purpose behind the effort. Picture siblings fighting over day-to-day responsibilities. The meetings are tense, and every disagreement feels bigger than it is. Then one of them says, "Do you remember when Dad used to wake us up at 5 a.m. to load the truck? He used to tell us, this business isn't about making money, it's about making sure no one in the family ever goes hungry." In that moment, the mood changes. The argument is no longer just about scheduling or costs. It reconnects to a shared value, something larger than any single dispute. Revisiting why you started together is not about living in the past. It's about reclaiming the bond that once felt unshakable. It's the same reason couples celebrate anniversaries or families keep traditions alive. Remembering how it began creates perspective. Struggles feel less like betrayal and more like bumps on a longer road. It doesn't solve every financial issue, but it softens the edges of conflict, making compromise possible. Sometimes this act of remembering can even uncover new solutions. If the business began as a way to serve the community, maybe scaling down to a smaller, community-focused model is more faithful to the original vision than chasing aggressive growth. If the business started as a way to spend more time together, perhaps the answer is rebalancing roles, so no one is burned out and everyone can still meet at the dinner table without resentment. The origin story holds clues to the values that matter most, and those values can guide decisions when money or pride threaten to blur judgment. Ultimately, revisiting why you started together is about anchoring the relationship before steering the ship. Businesses may shift direction, markets may change, but the bond that sparked the journey is still there. By pausing to remember it, siblings can turn conflict into cooperation, finding common ground not in the numbers, but in the heart of the family itself. When family businesses hit rough waters, the hardest part is often not the problem itself, but the way family members talk to each other about it. Old arguments resurface, emotions run high, and what should be a straightforward discussion about money or strategy turns into a personal battlefield. This is where bringing in a neutral voice can make all the difference. A neutral voice could be a business advisor, a trusted mentor, or even a family therapist. The point is not that they have all the answers, but that they stand outside the emotional web that ties siblings together. They can see things more clearly because they are not carrying the same history of rivalry, loyalty, or resentment. Imagine three brothers arguing about whether to sell part of the company. Each one is convinced the other two are being stubborn. Every meeting ends with raised voices and no progress. Then they invite a mediator who calmly asks each of them to explain not just what they want, but why they want it. Suddenly, one brother admits he's worried about retirement security. Another confesses he feels unseen for the hours he puts in. And the third admits he's holding on because he doesn't want to lose their father's legacy. What felt like three immovable walls turns into three very human fears. That shift only happened because an outsider knew how to ask the right questions. A neutral voice also reduces the risk of one sibling becoming the referee. When one family member steps into that role, it often backfires because their opinions are already colored by relationships. But when the perspective comes from someone who has no stake in the family dynamics, their guidance feels more balanced. It's similar to hiring a coach for a sports team. Players may be talented, but without a coach, they can waste energy fighting over strategies instead of playing the game. Sometimes families resist the idea, believing that bringing in an outsider means failure or disloyalty. But it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of care. It shows that the family bond matters enough to protect. Just as people visit a doctor to maintain health, families can seek outside counsel to preserve trust. By allowing a neutral voice to steady the conversation, siblings create space to be heard, understood, and respected. In the long run, that clarity may save both the business and the family ties that matter even more. One of the most common reasons siblings grow distant in a family business is the feeling that the load is not shared fairly. On paper, ownership may look equal, but in practice, one brother might be working 60 hours a week while another only shows up when it's convenient. Over time, that imbalance breeds resentment. The one carrying the heavier weight feels unappreciated, while the one contributing less may feel defensive or guilty. What begins as a business issue quickly turns into a personal wound. That's why adjusting the financial load fairly is essential, not only for the health of the business, but also for the health of the family bond. Fairness does not always mean equal. Imagine three siblings owning a bakery. One manages the shop full-time, another handles bookkeeping from home a few hours a week, and the third is barely involved. Splitting profits into 3 equal shares might look simple, but it doesn't reflect the reality of their work. In cases like this, families can consider shifting roles, adjusting salaries, or even revisiting ownership percentages. When each person's contribution is acknowledged in a tangible way, tension eases, and the business runs more smoothly. Another practical step is being transparent about effort and expectations. Too often, siblings avoid uncomfortable conversations because they don't want to hurt each other's feelings. But silence builds resentment. A structured discussion, perhaps even with an advisor present, about who is doing what and how they are compensated can clear the air. If handled respectfully, it can strengthen trust instead of weakening it. It's also helpful to remember that fairness includes financial risk. If one sibling has invested more savings into the business or taken on personal debt to keep it afloat, that sacrifice should be recognized. Pretending everyone carries the same level of risk only hides the truth and eventually sparks conflict. By aligning rewards with effort and risk, families build a sense of justice that protects relationships. There are times when a sibling may simply not want to be as involved. In those cases, an honest exit plan may be healthier than forcing a balance that will never come. Sometimes buying out a sibling's share or restructuring ownership creates peace where endless arguments once lived. The key is honesty paired with compassion. Adjusting the financial load fairly doesn't just balance the books, it balances emotions. When everyone feels seen, valued, and respected, the business has a chance to thrive, and the family has a chance to remain whole. When a family business starts to falter, the conversation often feels like it only has 2 possible paths: keep pushing at full capacity or close the doors entirely. That black and white thinking can put enormous pressure on siblings because either choice feels like a loss. Continuing at the same pace may drain finances and energy, while walking away can feel like abandoning a legacy. But there is another path that is often overlooked: scaling down instead of giving up. It's not about failure. It's about reshaping the business into something that fits the family's current season of life. Scaling down can take many forms. Maybe the business doesn't need to operate 6 days a week anymore. Perhaps the product line can be simplified to focus only on the most profitable or meaningful items. For families where the older generation is ready for retirement, scaling down might mean passing on a smaller, more manageable operation to the next generation instead of expecting them to carry the entire original model. By reducing the scope, the business can remain alive without consuming every ounce of time and emotional energy. Think of it like pruning a tree. At first glance, cutting back branches may look harsh, but the act actually helps the tree grow healthier and stronger. In the same way, trimming a business back to its essentials can reduce conflict and restore purpose. Instead of endless arguments about growth targets and expansion plans, siblings can focus on maintaining something that still honors the family name while giving them room to breathe. There are also hidden advantages to this approach. Scaling down can free up time for family members to pursue other work, hobbies, or simply enjoy more of life together. It can also reduce financial risk, since a leaner business requires fewer resources to survive. Most importantly, it preserves the symbolic thread of continuity. Even if the business is smaller, it still exists as a reminder of the family's effort and legacy, which can matter more to future generations than the size of the balance sheet. Sometimes the healthiest way to protect family harmony is not by pushing harder or walking away, but by finding the middle ground. Scaling down may not sound glamorous, but it can be a quiet, dignified solution that keeps both the business and the family intact. It acknowledges that seasons change, but connection and legacy can remain, even if the business looks different than it once did. One of the quiet tragedies of running a family business is when the business starts to swallow up every corner of family life. Suddenly, the Sunday dinner table, once a place of laughter, teasing, and shared meals, turns into another boardroom. Instead of talking about children, vacations, or old memories, the conversation drifts toward unpaid invoices, staffing shortages, or market competition. Over time, family members begin to dread gathering because they know the business will follow them there. Protecting the family table is about creating boundaries that safeguard the most sacred parts of family life from being overshadowed by work. Think back to childhood traditions, birthday cakes with uneven candles, holidays where everyone squeezed around the same table, even casual weeknight meals where stories were told. These moments are the threads that hold families together. If they are constantly interrupted by business concerns, those threads begin to fray. By agreeing as a family to keep certain spaces or times off limits to work talk, you preserve a place where relationships come first and profits have no seat. It doesn't have to be every gathering, but establishing at least one safe zone gives everyone the chance to reconnect as brothers, sisters, parents, and children, not as co-owners. For example, a family might set a rule that no business discussions are allowed during Sunday dinners or at family reunions. Another approach is to designate a specific day or meeting time for business conversations, so that issues have their own container and don't spill into personal spaces. This way, when you're clinking glasses at a wedding or playing with grandchildren on the lawn, you're not also arguing about payroll. The family table stays protected, and relationships are nourished without the constant weight of business on everyone's shoulders. Protecting the family table also helps the next generation. Children and grandchildren watching these dynamics learn what family means. If they only see adults arguing about money, they may grow up associating family time with stress instead of love. But if they witness traditions, laughter, and warmth, they inherit a sense of connection that outlives any business. At the heart of it, protecting the family table is about remembering priorities. Businesses can be rebuilt, profits can return, and strategies can change. But the feeling of belonging that comes from sitting at a table together cannot be replaced once it is lost. Choosing to protect that space is choosing to protect the soul of the family itself. When families pour years of effort into building a business, it can start to feel like the business itself is the legacy. The company logo, the storefront, the brand name, all of it becomes tied to identity. But the truth is, businesses come and go. Markets change, industries evolve, and even the strongest family enterprises may not survive forever. That's why it is so important to plan beyond the business. Legacy is bigger than revenue, and family bonds are deeper than balance sheets. By looking beyond the company, families can prepare for a future where love and connection endure, even if the business does not. Planning beyond the business begins with asking what you truly want to pass down. For some, it may be values like hard work, honesty, or generosity. For others, it may be traditions, gatherings, recipes, or rituals that bring people together. These are the treasures that hold families together long after the business is gone. A grandchild may not remember the details of how the family store operated, but they will remember the stories told around the dinner table about perseverance, kindness, and the way everyone pulled together in tough times. This kind of planning can take practical forms as well. Instead of investing every resource into the business, families might set aside funds for education, retirement, or even community projects that reflect their shared values. Some families create a small family foundation or scholarship fund, allowing future generations to continue giving back in the family's name. Others establish traditions like annual reunions or storytelling nights, where the history of the family is passed down intentionally. Each of these choices sends a powerful message: our identity is not tied to profit, but to connection. There is also a sense of freedom in planning beyond the business. When siblings know that their bond and their future together doesn't depend solely on whether the company survives, they can approach decisions with less fear and less defensiveness. The pressure eases because the family is no longer equated with the business. Instead, the business is simply one chapter in a much longer story. Ultimately, businesses may rise and fall, but the love between brothers, sisters, parents, and children can last generations if it is protected. Planning beyond the business means choosing to invest in memories, traditions, and values that no market downturn can take away. It ensures that even if the business unravels, the family's true legacy continues to thrive. So does an unraveling family business mean losing your brothers? Not if you choose to protect the bond first. Businesses rise and fall, but brothers, sisters, and families are meant to last longer than profit margins. If this resonates with you, share your own story in the comments. Has your family faced something similar? What worked and what didn't? And if you'd like more conversations about family, relationships, and preparing wisely for retirement, consider subscribing. We're building a community where wisdom across generations matters most.